Today's podcast is brought to you by Audible.com. Get a free audiobook download and 30-day free trial at www.audibletrial.com/goblin. Over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player. So what you're telling me is one of these days we're going to turn on Lifetime television and see a Hoarder's World of Warcraft edition, and we're going to see you on that.
Yes. I'll be I'll be buried in there with a bunch of Philosopher's Stone or something.
You're listening to the Goblin Goldcast with Dex and Mac. I got mouths to feed, so let's get this thing started. Time is money, friend.
Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, Azeroth. You are listening to the Goblin Goldcast, your guide to making gold in World of Warcraft. This is episode 6. I'm your host, Dex, coming to you from Napa, California. With me on Skype is my co-host, Mac, from Anchorage, Alaska, who, as I understand it, can't outrun a bear, but he can outrun his hunting partner. How you doing, Mac?
I'm doing pretty good. You just have to find a slower hunting partner, you know.
This week on the Goblin Goldcast, we'll be talking about staying organized in your gold-making ventures. But first, Mac, how was your week?
Well, as you know, I unfortunately stepped away from the game and wasn't making any gold this week. Went out hunting. But before we talk about that, I want to put send a thanks out to Ro at Realm Maintenance for mentioning us in his last podcast. We appreciate that.
Absolutely.
But yeah, no, went out with a good friend of ours for a number of years. Went out back behind Eureka in Alaska, caribou hunting. Did not get our caribou. Unfortunately, the caribou we saw, I woke up early in the morning, got out of the tent to relieve myself, and it's about 45 degrees in the morning. My glasses are fogged over. I have my shoes just kind of flopped on my feet, don't have them tied, and I start doing my thing, and as I do that, I look over my right shoulder, and about 50 yards away is right what we were looking for, a caribou. I don't know who was more surprised, the caribou or me. I thought we were going to have a scene out of something like Mary there for a second, you know. Yelled at the partner we were with, "Hey, give me my gun!" And I heard him struggling in the tent. Apparently, he got himself tangled up in his mummy bag and was unable to get it out. By the time I got the gun out of its case, out of the tent, out of its case, and was able to even try to sight in, the caribou had decided it was better to be heading off to parts unknown. So it was fortunate. Later on, I mean, I was angry I didn't get the shot off, but later in the day we had some equipment troubles, and we were kind of glad we didn't have the extra 500 pounds of meat with us. We were trying to get out. We got stuck behind a ridge. Took us about 14 hours to get back out behind this mountain. Had to play winch boy. We had our winch on the front of the ATV pulling us up the mountain because we had broken the axle on three different axles on the rig we were in. It has an 8-tire Argo, and 3 of the axles were unusable, so it was quite an adventure getting out.
Oh boy, and I know you ended up coming home a little bit early, which as it turns out, worked out well for our podcast, since we had a little bit of technical difficulty here while you were gone ourselves. We, as some of you might know, we knew that Mac was leaving town, and so we planned ahead, believe it or not, and recorded the podcast early before he left town. And I didn't get into too much of a hurry to edit it because I had extra time since we were recording it early. And after he left town, I popped it in and started to edit it and found out that it was 8 seconds long. After the first 8 seconds, the recording cut off, and somehow I didn't notice that. And so it kind of left us in a lurch, and I was struggling with what to do and whether to record a podcast solo, which I actually attempted and failed, and it's a podcast that you will never hear because it was that bad. I will never try to do this solo. I learned my lesson, and fortunately for all of you out there, you didn't have to suffer through it. But anyway.
So my text from out there near Paxton was saying we were heading back into town. I'll be in about 4 or 5 hours. Was good, huh?
It was. I was actually trying to edit the horrible podcast that I recorded solo, and I even had it planned. Next week's podcast, after you got back, I was going to call the one for this week solo. And next week's was going to be getting the band back together, but we'll be scratching that since the band never broke up, eh?
There we go. I swear though, after this last trip, that Snark and I we've been hunting several times. It always seems to end up. We have a lot of fun, but something always ends up in a disaster.
Well, you guys do have a history of having issues.
Our wives don't like us going out without adult supervision. I don't think they trust us to be the supervision.
Well, I'm kind of with them on this. I think they've got a point.
We did cross the Little Lucina River about 5 times on our way out. We got pretty good at that.
So this week we're talking about staying organized. And this is something that I personally have struggled a lot with, both in-game and out. I am not the most organized person in the world, but as you can imagine, with all the alts that I have, if I don't stay organized, I am actually in big trouble. It can be really bad. So the first thing that we're going to talk about for staying organized is record keeping. What I do, because I have so many alts, I keep an Excel spreadsheet, and my characters all have an entry on that where it shows the account that they're associated with, because I run 2 accounts in addition to any RAF accounts that come and go. And I put down the character's name, server or realm rather that they're on, what level they are, the class, the race, which professions they have, and how high their level in the profession is. And anyway, I follow all of that information as I'm going through and doing my daily chores and so forth. And being able to reference that can be a lifesaver. There's nothing worse than having to search around and try to figure out, okay, which character is my potion spec alchemist because I have to make these potions, or which character did I have leather crafting on, and I deal with a lot of different realms, and so for me it's a lot to remember, and so this really makes it easier. Do you keep any special records on yours? I know you're not dealing with as many characters, but
right. No, I've actually started doing that. I hadn't done it before, but I started getting enough alts that it started becoming difficult. I don't use the Excel spreadsheet, but I do have a notebook with everything written down. The Excel sounds it's just more work than I want to do. I guess I'm just old school.
Excel is actually very easy to use.
No, I use it.
It doesn't get much easier than that.
No, I use it at work. I like the notebook. It's just me.
Oh, okay. Well,
when I find something that works, I stick with it.
There.
Pencil, paper, crayon.
There you go. Well, yeah, I don't plan on changing the way that I'm doing it, because for me, I do write a lot of things down in a notebook, but this is something that I know I would misplace that particular sheet that had that on it, and it would just cost me more time. But anything that you can do to save time, when you're dealing, like I said, with a lot of characters, you want to get every single ounce of you want to make the best of your time. I guess is what I'm saying. Time is money, right?
Right.
The next thing on the list that we have is a personal guild bank. And before we get into that, it used to be that you needed 10 characters, I believe, to form a guild in order to make a guild bank. And Mac and I actually discovered the other day that that's been reduced.
Right. It was kind of a surprise I hadn't made a guild in forever, so.
Right, and we we actually were fooling around and we decided to make a guild called Goblin Goldcast because we were playing around on a server, and one of the servers we're on, and we found out that we only needed 5 characters to form it, and that shows you how long it's been since I've made one. It's probably been in place for a long time.
And what's funny is we had already stacked up 10 tunes.
Yeah. Using RAF accounts and everything, we had it all ready to go to get all 10, and didn't need them. That was funny.
We felt foolish.
Well, anyway, the guild bank, that is something that I have just been so happy that I've done. I actually keep multiple guild banks. I have one main one that I keep on each server, but I do set up a couple of other ones just for extra space. But the majority of the characters on each server are in the same guild and share the bank. And what I'm able to do is I'm able to gather together materials for crafting, making hexweave bags, or the Dranic Philosopher stones, or what have you. Anything that I'm making, storing hexweave bags before I sell them, anything like that I need to put in there. All my characters have access to it by way of the mobile banking perk, mobile guild banking perk that you have. And right. So, like I said, I've made a lot of use of that. Is that something you played around with yet?
Yeah, I the personal guild bank, I haven't done it except for the one we kind of were messing around with the other day. I've got a lot of characters that are in another guild, and I'm a little more social over there. I use the mailbox a lot, send stuff to my characters back and forth, which probably, I mean, it may not always be the best way to store items, but I do use the mailbox occasionally, especially on my engineer. I cheat a little bit and pop up that Mall E, and I'll mail stuff to other characters, or use Jeeves and use my own personal bank that way.
You know, I actually got into a little bit of trouble with that, and I'm still guilty of getting into trouble doing that, where I'll mail items between my characters and use that as extra bank space, and then you've got all this mail that's expiring that you got to resend and move around, and it can become a little bit of a nightmare. And I have lost items that way that have expired,
right?
And so I'm trying not to do it anymore.
I'm more guilty of it, like I said, on my tunes that are engineers, because all of them have G's, all of them have the Mall E, and I'll get out someplace and realize, oh crud, I forgot to empty my backpacks before I went out to go farm, and so I'll just pop the mailbox and send stuff back to myself, and or one of my other characters.
Right.
But yeah, usually my other characters I'm a little more careful with. Like I said, my engineers I get lazy on.
Well, my advice is to break that habit. I haven't completely broken it, and I hope to do so, soon.
Bad Dex, bad.
The next thing I have here is managing bag space and bank space, and this kind of goes a little hand in hand with the previous one that we just dealt with the guild bank. I'm one of those people that no matter what size bags I have, I manage to fill every slot, and same thing for the bank space. It's a nightmare for me. There's nothing worse than showing up, at a dungeon. You're all set to do some farming. You've done your research, or you're there to do some research, or what have you. You're all prepared, ready to go in. You've been reading up on Wowhead. You know what mobs are there, what they drop. You're all ready to farm it. You kill the first bunch of mobs. Let's say you're, I don't know, for instance, you're in, say, Nax, and you're going through, and you realize my bags are full. I've got no space. I can't loot a thing. Can you imagine something like that happening to somebody?
All the time, especially when I've been trade skilling the day before on my character. Just drives me nuts.
Yeah. I had to give you a hard time about that because I was actually on Skype with you when when you ran into that issue, and that's definitely happened to me. Another thing that happens a lot, I'll bring I've got a couple of mages that I would bring through and farm Ember Silk in Bastion of Twilight. And those characters have full Hexweave bags. And I put everything in the bank. The only thing I keep in my bag, well, I used to keep my old Findle's Looterang in there, but now that's worthless. But but I used to keep that, and I would keep a stack of my potions of treasure finding, and my Hearthstone, and that's all I would have in my bags. Everything else would be empty, and I would still fill up my bags with all the runs that I would do, because I'd do 30 to 35 runs before I would go back to a bank, and I would still fill up. And so what I would do is I would have the guild bank ready to go, where I'd cleared out space, and I would toss a whole bunch of stuff in there, or I'd have to stop and actually sell. But I can't imagine going in there with half my bags full. So what you end up doing, if you do something like that, you end up costing yourself a lot of gold, because if you have to stop in the middle and go sell or hearth back to your bank or what have you, that's the opportunity cost on that is huge. So I try to avoid it. I think you've tried to do your best to avoid it.
Yeah.
Sorry, I don't mean to rub it in, but
bad Mac.
Yeah. And especially if you don't have all Hexweave bags, because a lot of my characters don't. I don't.
Well, they've
normally.
got to be able to earn their keep before they get Hexweave from me.
Hexweave is for closers.
That's right.
So, but yeah, even if they don't have Hexweave, they're usually not farming. But even so, you really want to keep your bags as empty as possible for those opportunities. And just like we talked about before with mailing stuff back and forth, that's a Band-Aid. That's a short-term fix, and I don't recommend forming that bad habit. I think we've all done it, but it can come and bite you.
Yeah, like I said, on some characters more than others, but yeah.
Next up, we have having the right professions on the right characters. This becomes very important if you have less characters. If you have a huge alt army and you've got everything covered, 2-3 times over, it's not an issue. But if you're trying to run like most people with, maybe 7-8 alts tops, you want to make sure you have the right professions and have them paired up the right way. If you're planning on doing dungeon runs and you're looting items that you need to disenchant that are bind on pickup, you got to make sure that farming character is going to have enchanting, of course.
Right.
And if you're farming, cloth in those as well, then you know what you're having. You're having enchanting and you're having tailoring as the combo.
Right.
But it also helps for if you're limited on the number of characters you're dealing with and you're running a Sky Golem farm like I am and making a lot of gold that way.
Like I am, yeah.
Yes, we both dipped our toes into that pond, but if you're doing that and you're not running a lot of characters, then it's kind of a no-brainer that the three professions you're going to have to be maintaining on your tunes are alchemy and engineering, and you're going to need a miner.
Correct.
So anyway, like I said, right professions on the right tunes. I personally have every profession covered at least once, and most of them only once on a server. But other ones, it pays to have a whole lot of alchemists for me. Same thing goes for tailors.
Right. And I've got everything covered on the Alliance side. On the Horde side, I've still got a couple. Jewel crafting is what I'm trying to bring up right now. That will be the last one till I have them all the professions.
Oh, okay, so you have everything but jewel crafting up to 700 now?
Not everything up to 700. I've got them. I've got tailoring, alchemy, engineering, and smithing up to 700.
Okay.
And I've got to get my inscription and my jewel crafting up.
Okay.
And leather making.
Now I know since we're talking about having the right professions and all of that, With Legion, there's some big changes. They're continuing the trend that they started about not really having to have 700 on everything. With a skill level of 1, you can do most things. Now, it's not going to be optimal in a lot of cases, but you can do everything. There are a few recipes that require max skill or near max skill, and anything from older content still going to require that. But they've really kind of focused on, well, you need to do the different quests to get 2-star or 3 stars on a particular recipe, and what that does is it makes the recipe use less mats.
Right.
So that's where they've kind of headed that direction. It's caused a lot of people to start to feel like that it really doesn't matter what your skill is. But I think like the mounts and things like that are still requiring max level skill.
Right. That's nice. I mean, they've got a catch-up feature for somebody who's coming back or brand new to the game. And I don't know. I don't mind it. There are pluses and minuses. I know they do make it a little easier to get your skill up.
Yeah.
Than going old school. Like, I didn't realize they had a catch-up mechanic when I first came back, and you reminded me and saved me a lot of time and a lot of gold.
Well, Draenor is where the really good catch-up mechanic is. From what I've seen in Legion, it's more of a you don't need the skill level kind of deal.
Right.
Whereas in Draenor, they gave you the way to skill it up very fast and eliminated your need for a high level skill for a lot of the recipes, but still had a few that required it. So they continue to shift that direction a little bit. Speaking of the catch-up mechanic that you have in Draenor, I took advantage of that for getting up these engineers that I recently brought up, and it was really fast and really cheap. I hadn't done that yet on the engineers, but boy, anybody who leveled engineering back in the day knows that you would get up into those skill points that were right there at the top of an expansion, those final 20 or so skill points, and you're making things that are costing you a fortune. And so kind of hard to skill up on those things. And so I was glad for that. It cost me virtually nothing. In fact, I had all of the mats just lying around in a guild bank ready to go.
Yeah, I just max my skill up, and then I run over and I get my plans for once I'm maxed out. Then I get my plans for the Sky Golem. I go over and get the recipe for Jeeves and all. I mean, and all of those. Do all the minor stuff that you have to do to be able to get Jeeves. I like having Jeeves. I like being able to bring up that character to be able to sell and repair. What is that, once an hour, I believe it is?
I'm not sure what I think it might be every 4 hours. I don't know. I don't bring it up that often, so I'm not really sure.
I've never had I use them maybe once a night, so I don't remember what the cooldown is.
I don't think I've ever bumped up against the cooldown, so but that's probably that's probably because I don't use it that often. But I do like having all the toys that engineers have for gameplay.
Oh, yeah. It's almost like having a mage being able to port all over the place.
There you go. The next one on our list is parking alts where they're needed and setting hearthstones to limit travel time to the farms. This one here, this one's really about if you have an alt army. So if this is not how you make gold, if you don't make gold with a lot of alts, then this is really not an issue for you. But what I found is if you park these characters where they're needed and set the hearthstones at the right place, you are saving a tremendous amount of time. If you're doing the half hill farm every day and the characters that you have doing that are basically doing that and doing an engineering combine, say, or an alchemy combine, they're just sitting in one place. Make that place the half hill farm. Leave them out there.
Right. I set my Hearthstone up to the lazy turnip there at Half Hill.
Right.
And then you're really close to being able to fly to
2 moons.
2 moons to be able to port basically all over Azeroth. So that's for me that's a no-brainer for my mage that does the Twilight Highlands up there and farming up there. I set my heart there, but he can port all over the place, so that's not a big deal.
Right. You're talking about doing Bastion of Twilight?
Bastion of Twilight.
Okay.
Doing the Bastion of Twilight, farming the Ember Silk in there. There's a little inn right below there. I set my hearth right there, and I just poured over there, and it saves a lot of time.
Yeah. So have you done the water elementals down there, down below as well, or have you only done the Bastion Twilight?
I've done them. I've done them before. I haven't done them since I've come back this time, but I have farmed before out there.
Okay. Another thing, not just for gold making, but also if there's a mount that you want that's in a dungeon or in a raid, and you're throwing 10, 12 alts at it, and they're really not doing anything else at the time. Hey, park them right outside the instance. It'll save you so much time. What I've found is if I get the bug to farm a mount, say, and I know I can throw a lot of characters at the dungeon and really have a strong chance of getting that mount. If my characters are spread out all over the place and I have to run each and every one of them out to the instance, I might decide to do something else because I'll say, it's going to take me a while to get them all together. Whereas if I was focusing on that, and that was what I was trying to get done over the course of that week or so, I would have them there waiting, and it would be just in and done really quickly.
Yeah, I do that when I do my weekly run at Nax. I park my tunes out at Nax and then start running through them because, like I said, it takes 15, 20 minutes, probably 20 minutes to run the whole thing, depending on which character I'm on.
So you're doing Nax in about 15, 20 minutes?
About 20 minutes, I think, for a full clear.
Does it take longer when your bags aren't empty? Sorry, I couldn't resist, but
I see how you're going to be tonight.
Yeah. Well, I'm just I'm giving you a hard time, but
you're picking on the tired man. I've been living on very little sleep for the last week and eating camp food. Of course, fortunately I can cook.
Well, I'm a little tired too. I spent the better part of a day trying to edit a podcast that was beyond help. And so before I found out that you were actually coming home, and then I was able to just put it in a little folder that I will never look at again.
We call that the recycle bin.
Yeah, this is this is something that I never want to see the light of day. It sounded like I was reading the ingredients off a cereal box. It was that bad, and so you saved all of us. You really did.
I was doing a lot of label reading this week, and I realized I should have bought a book with it. It's sitting out there on the side of a hill doing nothing for hours on end. Gets boring.
So where do you like to? We're talking about parking your alts where they're needed. Where do you like to park yours to run through? You said Nax. Anywhere else?
Nax. I was going to do this before I took off on that hunting trip. Planning on doing Deep Home to try to get that stupid dragon mount that I haven't been able to get yet. That's like every other mount that I don't know is hard to get. They just seem to drop off. First time I go through. But that one.
I'll let you look at mine if you want.
Yeah. That's. You can look at my Headless Horseman mount.
Yeah. While we're on the topic of farming, a lot of these farms can be pretty repetitive, and they can put you to sleep if you've been at them for a while. So I highly recommend that if you want to avoid getting burned out, that you find something to listen to while farming to break up the monotony. One of the ways I like to do that is by listening to an audiobook. For you, the listeners of the Goblin Goldcast, Audible is offering a free audiobook download with a free 30-day trial to give you an opportunity to check out their service. My next book's going to be Illidan by William King. It's the perfect World of Warcraft book to listen to with the launch of Legion on the way. As a listener to the show, you can download Illidan or another audiobook free by trying audible.com. Just go to audibletrial.com/goblin to get started. The next one on our list is add-ons, having what you need and not overdoing it.
And yeah, I'm kind of a minimalist with add-ons, and I know in a future podcast we're going to talk about add-ons. But for once, for gold making, I use Titan Panel. You introduced me to that. I love it. I like to be able to see all the characters on the server. I can see who has what amount of gold, and I have a running total of how much gold I have on the server for that account. I like that. I use TomTom. It allows me to get around from point to point. I can set waypoints if I want to do that.
Yeah, that's a real good one to have. And you mentioned Titan Panel. One of the nice things about Titan Panel is it doesn't take up a lot of screen real estate. While I'm not a minimalist when it comes to the number of add-ons that I run, I actually run probably way too many. I am as far as screen clutter. I do not like to have a little tiny window to the world followed by, with a UI crowding everything out. And that's one thing that it gives you. It's nice to have. Mainly what I wanted to cover with this, and I wanted to make sure that we hit, was that you have the add-ons that you need, and that you don't have too many add-ons for your gold making tunes. And the reason why is because you can cause yourself some issues where you can slow your computer down, too many things running in memory. Not everybody has that issue, but not everybody has a state-of-the-art system that they're running the game on. I know for me, I can be running at times up to 5 accounts at the same time on the same computer. And if I have all of my add-ons running on every one of them, it'll even make my computer cry uncle sometimes, just a little bit. So so you don't want to try to break the record for seeing how many add-ons you can run at once, but you do want to make sure that you have what you need. One of the add-ons that I use that's kind of a lightweight one is Auto Quest. It's an auto turn-in for quests.
Right.
And so when I'm running through, I don't have to click all the dialog boxes. And when you're doing a whole lot of tunes through an area, that time seems to add up. And so a good thing to have. That one's pretty invaluable at times.
Right.
Trade Skill Master. Boy, there's an entire show on that if we wanted to. This thing does everything.
I've tried it. I'm still. It's got a learning curve, and my brain gets fried sometimes. So I work nights. I get home late, and when I get on and try to use that, I'm still behind the curve on that one.
Well, don't feel too bad. I actually gave up on it twice before I got it to work right for me. It worked, but it didn't do everything that I wanted it to do, and really struggled with it. And it's let's be honest, it's not the most user-friendly add-on out there, but it's really not bad once you get an idea for what it's doing. And I don't use all the modules. I have certain modules that I use, but the ones I have, I do love. I love the one for vendoring, where it knows which items I want to sell to a vendor, so I don't have to click on each thing to sell. And when I've got hundreds and hundreds of Dranic Philosopher Stones that I'm selling, I want it to know that I'm selling those, that I want to sell those, and that I'm not wanting to keep 40 of them in my inventory at one time.
Right.
So that will really help you pick up the pace with things. Obviously, being able to snipe in the auction house. I mean, I don't want to get too deep into it because we're actually going to have a whole show at some point on add-ons for gold making and get pretty in depth into it. Before we do that, though, I want to get a chance to introduce you to a few more add-ons that I use for gold making, so that you can give your opinion on those as well.
Right.
But
I do like the Undermine Journal. That's another add-on I like.
Absolutely.
Gives you the average prices of something across the different realms. I really like that.
Yeah, I use that in combination with Trade Skill Master, and between the two of them, pricing, I've got it down. I know exactly what I'm looking at, and from realm to realm, makes a huge difference, because some things that I sell for a huge profit on a couple of my realms, on other realms, I would stay away from that market, and I wouldn't touch it with a 10-foot pole. There's no profit in it. Some items are gold in one place and worthless in another. It's just a quirk of the different realms.
Well, for me, it saves me, because I'm kind of like a hoarder in my bank, and it's like once every couple months I've got to go in there and do a house cleaning.
Right.
It's has saved me from vendoring things that I really shouldn't vendor. It's like, woo, nope. Let's go to the auction house of that one. Yeah.
So what you're telling me is one of these days we're going to turn on Lifetime television and see a Hoarder's World of Warcraft edition, and we're going to see you on that.
Yes. I'll be buried in there with a bunch of Philosopher's Stone or something.
Yeah. Look at all this! Look at all this Tier 1 rating gear that he, for some reason, still keeps in his bank. No one knows why. Maybe he doesn't know about the transmog. Not that there's anything wrong with that.
That's right.
Well, if there's nothing else, why don't we tell them how they can contact us?
Well, you can get a hold of us at Goblin Goldcast on Twitter. You can see us on Facebook at Goblin Goldcast. And you can get a hold of us by sending us an email at mac@goblingoldcast.com.
We also have our voicemail now finally set up on our website. And you can go to goblingoldcast.com, click on the little button on the right-hand side, and you can leave us a message, tell us what you think, or tell us what you'd like to hear us talk about. If you listen to us on iTunes or Stitcher, please subscribe, and we look forward to talking to you guys soon.
See you next time.
Now go make some gold.
Let me buy you a drink. No way, you buy me a drink. Now, you know what? Just give me the money.